Hello and welcome to week 10 of Introduction to Data Science. So last week was about classification and model building. We learned about logistic regression, which is a modeling approach for predicting binary outcomes, so a 0, 1 or a yes, no type of outcome. And then we also talked about making predictions. We introduced the idea of using a training and a testing set to avoid overfitting. And then we also talked a little bit about feature engineering as well, and doing all of this with tidy models. We didn't have any application exercises last week, but during the code along, we basically walked through an approach of, or an example of putting into practice everything that we had learned throughout the week using functions from the tidy model. So if you've missed any of these videos, this is a good time to go back and review them, as this week is going to be building on that. A quick recap on the quiz. So two things that came up based on your feedback was on R-squared and correlation coefficient. So one of the questions asked, adding a non-useful predictor to a model, blank R-squared. Is it increases, decreases, or doesn't change? The answer is increases. And the reason is that our R-squared increases with each predictor that we add to the model. On the other hand, adjusted R-squared will increase if the predictor that we're adding is actually usefully contributing to the performance of your model. So that's why we talked about when we're comparing multiple regression models, adjusted R-squared is something we might look to as opposed to R-squared. The other question was about the correlation coefficient, and this is in a way a tricky question, but one that is to kind of remind you what the correlation coefficient is. The question said if the correlation coefficient between two variables is 0, the variables can still be related to each other. And the answer is true, and the reason why this is that the correlation coefficient measures the strength and the direction of the linear association between two variables. So R would be +1 if there was a perfect linear relationship between the two variables. But what if there was a perfect curved relationship? Then R would not be 1. In fact, it might be closer to 0. It's hard to get a correlation coefficient exactly of 0, but even if it is possible that your two variables are related to each other with really small r if that relationship is nonlinear. This week, we're going to be talking about model validation and estimation. But before we get into the content for this week, I want to remind a little bit about the deadlines we have coming up. Lab is due tomorrow, and remember that for your lab this week, we're not doing like a new data analysis example, but instead you're making progress on your projects, and your evaluation will be based on the issues you have opened and your workflow as well. We have a round of peer evaluations due Wednesday, and I'm going to use that data pretty quickly to get back to you in terms of how the teams are going and see if we can help with any of the team dynamic issues. Hopefully many of them are resolved right now, but that'll be an opportunity to either point those out or just say thanks to each other, which we could all use nowadays. And on Thursday, our homework 4 is due. So homework 4 this week, remember, is a three-part homework assignment. The first one is making a really ugly ggplot2, and I'm very much looking forward to your submissions for that. That's always one of my most, fun moments of the class is perusing through your submissions. So try to get them to be as ugly as possible. Part 2 is about learning about a new package, and I've listed a bunch of simple packages for you that you can try. And the idea is just getting some practice with reading documentation and seeing how you can do something new in R without particular instruction from the class. But you'll see that a lot of the packages I suggested build on things you've learned in the class, either because they're tidyverse adjacent or they're basic R functionality that we've talked about. And part 3 is providing peer review to fellow students. So make sure that you actually go through and do these. And then on your homework assignment, we're just asking you to drop links to the issues that you've created. And we're going to be looking at both have you done them and then the quality of the feedback that you give to each other. So this week, we're going to learn about cross-validation for evaluating model performance. So we're going to build on this idea of overfitting and avoiding overfitting, but diving deeper into what more we can do with our training data to build better models. And then we're going to close up the unit with bootstrapping for uncertainty quantification. So far we've been focused on prediction and getting our predictions, predictive performance to be better, but we also are interested in estimation of parameters as well, like the slope. We've interpreted what the slope means, but we haven't really talked about, well, this is the number the model spit out, but what is the give or take around it? What's the margin of error around it? So I'm going to wrap up the week with a discussion around bootstrapping. A couple notes on your projects. Now is a good time to review the peer feedback that you get from your classmates. Also, please do set team meetings and regular check-ins. We have less than 2 weeks now until the end of the class, so we want to make sure that you're using this time wisely, and the earlier you set your team meetings, the more likely that people are actually going to be able to make it. Meeting might mean you're hopping on a Zoom call. Meeting might mean that you're conversing on GitHub issues. Meeting might mean everyone decides that they're going to be online and working, so you can easily message each other on Teams, but not necessarily have a video call on. I'm leaving it up to you as to how you want to plan your time, but it is important for you to be working on this and making progress as we go. And finally, use the student hours and the code along. We're going to actually make some time for the code along during the code along as well for your questions on the project. So even though it might feel like your question is very specialized to your particular project, if you were to pose it during one of these, even if there are others on the call and waiting to ask questions, I'm fairly certain that both myself and David can answer these questions in a way that will be useful for others to hear about as well. So keep making progress and come and ask questions. Looking forward to seeing you throughout the week. Have a good week.